Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Small Business Saturday with
Sharea.
and Sherry. And we are here today to talk about never stop learning. So, we have 3 points that we are going to go over when it comes to your business and how you can make sure that you are constantly in a position of being just on top of your game. So, the first point we're going to talk about is know your industry. Our second point will be listen to your client. And then our third point will be to have a development plan.
All right. So know your industry has a lot within it, right? Because we didn't want to generalize or assume that everyone is doing the same type of work. What we mean by that is that you need to first be an expert in whatever you're doing or learning or moving towards becoming an expert in whatever you're doing, but also knowing how, um, what type of products are the most important for that industry, what type of relationships you need to have for that industry to keep yourself in a position to learn from not only um, other experts, but also materials that are related to whatever industry you're in or resources that are a part of your industry. So, for example, as a social worker or a therapist, one of the things that I will always have to do is to have continuing education courses that I take each year or every 2 years to be able to get my to maintain my license. And so that's just an example of a constant means of learning. But what it does, it's not just about doing it for the requirement of my license, but actually doing it to fit the needs of who I want to serve, who I want my audience to know that I'm an expert and when I discuss or talk about it, and then also building new expertise as you develop your career and have gotten older in it, right? So, for example, how I may have talked about trauma in 2007 is totally different than how we will talk about it now, just based off of different theories or different approaches that they have developed and or have worked and evolved out. And so staying abreast and doing it in a learning fashion is, and to me that becomes really really important if you're providing services to people, because it's like you want to know that you're not harming those that you care for. And so I would say education, and then learning from others. There are tons of experts in different industries. So, and I use my industry for a moment, but if I step out and go to the training element or the training part of it, even learning different softwares, learning different approaches to how to present your product to others, how to create a webinar series and then launch it correctly. So always learning and growing is really important, and you need to know your industry and what they need from you to be able to do that. So,
Absolutely. And then, it can be a little intimidating,
mhm.
possibly just to also constantly be in that position of learning, especially if you master a particular way of doing an aspect of your business. But what happens is that then you may not be as efficient because you're not opening yourself up to
Mhm.
other ways of learning things. And it's not to say that what you were doing before is bad. It's just that there's another alternative that now makes sure that you stay relevant as well, because if you are constantly learning and staying abreast of what's happening in your field, in your industry, and make sure it automatically ensures that you also continue to remain relevant, not only in your industry but specifically to your clients, which takes us right into our next point.
Yeah. And just really quickly, one of the things my mom used to say is you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's important to make sure you're always learning so that you can continue to know more to be able to impact those who are those that you're going to serve. And so, like you said, that does transition us into our second tip, which is to listen to your client,
Yes.
right? It seems like it should be obvious, but it's not always, because sometimes we can become such an expert that we aren't listening to the needs of our clients. And so, um, making sure that you're getting real time feedback, not past history feedback, right? And what I mean by that is you may have been really good at doing something for a very long time, but when things started to change and you didn't, your customer may have started to change, and you're still trying to give them the old approach when they have a new expectation of how you are going to serve them. And I'm going to use therapy for this one, especially because I think one of the things that when I first started, or when a lot of therapists who are older in their career first started, you didn't need to do social media. You didn't need to do any kind of connecting or branding around your and I think you still had to do branding, but it was less visual branding. Let's say that. So it was more about a different type of branding. And so when I watch therapists who are now like further in their career and have no social media, have no outlets for their therapy clients that are new to reach out to them or to connect with them, and they have an expectation that you use this one format, which is go to your insurance or Psychology Today, and then if you can't find me, then oh well, right? But then what that does is it stifles your business, because you're not listening to your client change by saying the client has now changed and says, now I expect to know you a little differently as my therapist. Now I expect you to not look at disclosure or disclosing things the exact same way you did in 1995, right? You need to start looking at it differently, because you still need to stay within the values and the boundaries of your career and profession, but you still also need to hear your audience say, or your client say, I don't feel connected with you, so I'm less likely to reach out to you to want you to be my therapist. And so finding that important like ear to your clients is almost like, I think, one of, if not the most important parts of your business, if you're into serving people, especially. And if you create products, then you do it differently, but we're not products. If you create like uh, things that are like necessities or stuff like that, it's a little bit different, but it's not that most of us aren't doing that type of career.
Yeah, like two things came to mind as you were discussing that point. One, there's a hairstylist that I no longer go to because of the fact that she did not want to stay abreast of the new techniques and a way of like styling hair. And like, so I'm natural. I no longer relax my hair. And so when I first went to her several years ago, I mean, she laid my hair out, but the techniques and my expectation then were totally different than what my expectation is now. And
Yeah, I got YouTube.
yeah, so I went to her, I think it was like last year. And when I tell you the experience was horrible, and even during that time when I was talking with her, I was mentioning just different things. She's like, oh, I'm not doing that. Like, whatever, that's so unnecessary, blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that. But my experience then suffered because of the fact that she was not abreast of the most current techniques
Mm-hmm.
that will make the experience of getting your hair done a lot more pleasant when you have natural hair. And so I'll never go back to her again. Like, she just
Yeah.
really lost that business. And it was crazy because my very first experience with her was so great. I was just like, oh, I finally found my stylist. And as a Black woman, when you find that one stylist,
You
you're
good.
like,
You
that,
sitting
like,
here.
you have it, right? And then I also thought about Blockbuster. I remember going to
Yeah.
Blockbuster every Friday night, going to get movies. And like, you would be so excited, even as a kid, and then even as I became an adult, because Blockbuster was still, relevant. And on date, like, that was date night. You in there with your boo picking out the movie. Like, I picked my
On
movie
this Netflix and
store,
chill.
right? You get your snacks at the counter, get the popcorn and the candy, even though it was totally overpriced, but it was part of the experience.
Exactly.
And like, now where's Blockbuster? Because they didn't listen to the changing needs of customers and how they
Streaming.
wanted to rent movies. So,
Mm-hmm.
you can be awesome and great, and you can be the leader of the field at one point in time, but then because you don't listen to your customers, now you literally no longer exist.
Yeah. And when you think about who your customer is, and we've talked about that in some previous videos, you want to listen to the whole of them, right? And so your expertise is going to solve their problem, but you want to know how they need to hear you solve their problem. You want to
Yes.
know how they need to see you solve their problem in order for you to continue to be impactful. The only way you can do that is customer satisfaction, is to really have like an ear to your client, to let them give you feedback, right? There's times when we don't want to listen to our clients because we are the expert and think we know. But the reality is that they know what their needs are way before you do. And they also know what they're going to receive and what's palatable to them. And as you grow professionally, where if you're talking from a small business, whatever type of product or service, if you don't listen to your customer, you can lose out on so much growth. And listening to your customer provides you with your next customer.
Yes.
Right. And so I would say that your best customer is one who wants to then spread to the world that they have this product from this great person or service from this great person, that they want others to have it. Because ultimately, the only way or one of the best ways to grow is a part of your reputation. And people want to be heard. I want to be heard.
Yes.
Right? Like your example of the hairdresser, I totally get it. I stopped going to a woman because I shaved the side of my hair about sometime last year. And I was like, I wanted to shave it just so I can have it off and then let it grow back slowly because it was starting to thin. And she was like, well, no, if we did that, we have to cut all your hair off. And I was like, but no, I'm telling you what I want.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you that that's not an option for me. I want to reach a certain year of my locks. So in my mind, no matter what these look like, they get in there, right? And so if I tell you that that's what I want as the customer, helping me to find the solution or even collaborating with me, because I was like, well, I'm open to cutting them short. I'm open to doing a bob style, any kind of thing to like make sure that I can still have my locks, right?
Yeah.
And she couldn't do it. I went to someone else and we found a creative way for me to do it, still cover them. And now my hair's starting to grow, and watching it grow, I'm like, I thought I couldn't do it. Right. So, but and everything before that was awesome. Like she was styling my hair well. She was twisting it. It was feeling good. She was around the corner, which was great. So it was like, it was all these great factors. But then when she didn't listen to me and tried to really basically tell me it was all or nothing, it was like, well, I guess it's nothing.
Right.
Right. So you don't want to lose people that were really willing to ride with you.
Exactly.
Just because you don't want to hear them out or collaborate in their need with your solution. Right. So just something to think about. So just remember that. Was that our last one?
No,
Oh,
so
no, no,
that's
no.
the point, which is to have a development plan.
Yes. And so oddly enough, I'm working on a project right now with an agency that I'm working with equity and or racial equity work. And we're trying to do a framework for a committee. And I'm going to tell the story, try to summarize it as short as possible. And we're trying to do a summary. And so I stopped everybody and said, trying to create a committee and a framework for developing the committee and the ground rules or whatever. And so I said, all right, let's just stop. Let's stop making a bunch of extra work before we have a plan. Yeah. Right. And so when we think about learning, when we think about developing ourselves professionally and developing or knowing who our client is, we also need to start developing a plan around how we want our growth to continue so that we can provide to that target audience. And so stopping ourselves and saying, what are the development areas that I need that are ongoing, mm-hmm. that are long-term and then short-term, right? And so within those 3 areas, you develop goals around your learning and maintaining your expertise in your field, right? So and I'm going to give an example of one of your techniques versus your learning and so I said earlier about continuing education, but another example is learning your softwares. Yes. Right. So if you are a therapist or a person who works in medical field, you have to know billing codes. You have to know how to, even if you're not doing them yourself, you still need to understand what you're billing, what your codes are. You need to understand what's relevant to your client and the service that you're providing. You're not going to just come out of college and be like, oh, I know all of the codes in the world. You have to learn them, as well as learn what is the changing codes when you do things like COVID happened. We had to change to virtual. What's the virtual code versus the non-virtual code, right? So learning is this ongoing thing. One of your plans or on your development plan, you might actually say to master the understanding of the base and foundational codes that are utilized in my service, right? And so that might be my one short-term goal. But my long-term goal is to do an annual check-in on any new codes or development codes that might be out there service codes that might be out there that impact my industry. And so the reason why that is so important is because you don't want to be caught, and specifically using that example, you don't want to be caught in a position where you're losing money versus gaining money. Yeah. Or growing to get money. And then I could take that same example and we think about online software, online courses, and software that you might use for an online course. You might have started off doing YouTube for free and realized that I could start using a platform to make some money and to actually sell some courses. So then you research 5 different platforms and you find out, oh, this one is for me. When you get to that one that's for you, you need to find Facebook groups, YouTube videos. I'm the queen of YouTube when it comes to how to. I mean, I figured out how to blow up my stability ball or my little ball that you work out with off of YouTube. Like knowing that you gotta keep learning, but you need that plan so that you know how to keep your learning in order, right? And that can be, to me, in all areas, not just one. So I'm sorry to take all of that. Go ahead.
No, it's good. No, and even with coaching, like just making sure, like even no matter how many years you've been in the field, no matter how much of an expert you can always benefit from doing coaching with other from other people in your industry.
Oh my gosh,
well.
yes.
And so there's a financial
and outside as well, right?
Yes.
So I actually specifically looked for a business coach that was not a therapist because I wanted to be able to learn how to build a community. I wanted to be able to learn how to use social media and to brand yourself. And although there are specific ways to do it for each industry, I needed someone who understood marketing in general. So my coach needed to reflect that for the business, right? So being okay with it also being outside learning and internal learning with your expertise. Sorry, I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, and so just with the coaching, you have to be willing to invest in yourself. Just like you want your clients to invest in you by purchasing your products and your services, the best thing you can do for yourself and for your clients is to invest back into yourself by making sure that you're getting that coaching as well. And depending on the type of coaching, that's going to determine like how expensive it is. Like working with someone one-on-one is going to be a lot more expensive than purchasing, let's say, one of their online courses or purchasing one of their books. But don't knock out the possibility of coaching just because of the cost of it. Like there's creative ways to get coaching, even just with starting off. Let's say if you're working with a very limited budget, just start following people online. Like people give tips on their social media accounts. So even starting off with following them online and starting off with maybe their lower level products or services that they offer. And then sometimes people offer sales, they offer discounts, like especially like around holidays.
And I'm going to tell you a secret. At some point, ladies, you're going to have to spend some money.
Yes.
Right? So I totally agree with starting with all the free, like, so I think you should start free until you have resources that are expendable, but everyone's different, right? So I don't think and I also understand, for me, I can say that because my foundational service is based off of my education. And so it becomes very different than if I'm going out and starting a business like strictly on a product or service that isn't related to my foundational service of like therapy, right? So I can say that, like, so I started my business with no money in this traditional sense of I didn't have like an investor or take out a loan. A lot of people do that, but what they start doing is trying to spend more money than what they're making. I think sometimes you should hold up and do as much free stuff as you can. But when you start seeing some profit, you need to invest that back into you and your learning. And I would actually say or argue that investing it into your learning before investing it into, say, even renting a space.
Yeah.
Because the learning is going to allow you to rent multiple spaces. The space is going to then become your focus, and it's hard for you to keep learning and growing because you got to make sure you got enough money to pay for that space. So that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, so definitely don't count out coaching, no matter what level you are. Is that one, there are resources available, and then two, it's like Sharea said, at some point you got to sacrifice. And that first time that, let's say, you invest in a higher level program, it may be a little tough, right? Maybe a little tight, but you'll see the payoff. And that's where even doing your research, that whoever you choose to get coaching with and work with, make sure you've done your research to ensure that they produce results. They're not just someone who has a huge following and they know what to say, but not really how to do it.
Oh yeah. Oh God, yeah. That could be a video on its own, and I'm not gonna go any further with that because I think we are sometimes fooled with, again, and you guys have probably heard me say this a million different videos, quantity versus quality. Mm-hmm. And I'd rather you be very strong at pushing out a quality product of 2 good people versus 5 people who are just average or below average, right? So it's like really making sure that you do your research when you're about to invest. And I also think investing at your level, right? So you may not be able to afford the $5,000 coach, but you might be able to afford the $150 one when you start.
Right.
And that be okay, because at the end of the day, that's going to be if you utilize that coach well, it could benefit you to the point where you will be able to afford that $5,000 coach if you want them, because you may not need them at that point.
Yeah.
You also can find that some people are undercharging for their service, and we're gonna go nowhere with that because that's a whole nother video. I mean, I was guilty of it. Like,
yeah.
And I thank God for having people in my life to say something. And we talked about this, I think, in one of our live ones.
We did.
But when it comes down to it, you got to know your worth. And if you don't know it, you got to talk about it with people who should.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So never stop learning, know your industry, listen to your client, and do a development plan for your learning process. And we hope that you learn something, that you continue to learn, and that you continue to grow. All right, you guys, be well.
Bye.